Hi, I'm Alan Vizzutti. You're listening to The Other Side of the Bell.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to everything trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We'll help you take your trumpet playing to the next level. I'm John Snell, trumpet specialist here at Bob Reeves Brass, and I'll be your host for this episode. Joining me today is trumpeter Alan Vizzutti. Well, I'm honored to have Alan Vizzutti as my guest today. Alan is one of those trumpet players that needs no introduction. He's played with a rainbow of artists, from Chuck Mangione, Woody Herman, Chick Corea, to Doc Severinsen, the NBC Tonight Show Orchestra, and many, many others. He's toured in over 70 countries, all 50 states, and even though he makes Seattle, Washington his home, he is in demand as a soloist, teacher, clinician all around the world. Alan has recorded many albums, including Ritzville with Stanley Clarke and Chick Corea, solo jazz albums like Skyrocket and Trumpet Summit, and many others. Alan is proud to be a Yamaha performing artist. We'll get to Alan's interview here in a moment after a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. And now here's my interview with Alan Vizzutti. All right, joining me today at ITG, on the other side of the bell, Alan Vizzutti. Alan, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
Man, over 100 episodes I've been wanting to have you on, and so I'm tickled pink to have you here.
That's a lot of episodes.
It's, 10 years, one every month or so.
Oh, yeah.
But let's talk about the trumpet.
Okay.
How did you get started? Did it just kind of fall in your lap, or did you?
My father tossed it into my lap. He owned a music store. Missoula, Montana. Mm-hmm. It was the only music store. He was a smart guy. He was a self-taught trumpet player. He studied a little bit of music, ended up in other fields, and self-employed business person with a great artistic sense, et cetera, et cetera. And so he actually started me and taught me until I went to the Eastman School of Music. And
really? So your father was your teacher?
Yes, my only one.
That's amazing. So my son plays trumpet, and I get about 5 words in, and it shuts down. So did you guys just have a wonderful relationship?
I had similar experiences with my own sons.
Okay. So it wasn't easy.
No, well, my relationship with him was one of those that worked just because of the chemistry or whatever. Yeah, there were a couple of bumps along the road, 15 years old or something. But what I'm talking about is, I'd get a little ticked off at some criticism or something and quit. And then by 2 hours later, I'm up practicing again. That kind of thing. And that didn't last. So I wanted to say, though, the fundamental, as I look back and sort of rethink what helped me so much for reasons like this podcast and teaching, was he was constantly telling me about and encouraging me to have the best sound I could make and to phrase and play music. And he also noticed that the technical interface with the horn was a good one. That's not a given. Every person cannot interface with every instrument well, just because we're all different physically, for sure, let alone without any of the components of artistry that the brain magically contains.
Yeah, the music side of things.
The music side and the
but the
creative
actual
side of the
physics
brain.
of it, yeah.
And so that was just really serendipitous luck that I interfaced with the horn well in terms of embouchure and flexibility and that kind of things. Then he continued to challenge me, and I obviously didn't know this till much later, just giving more than he thought I could learn in a certain period of time. And he did, through quite a period of that, set out pretty strict lesson plans. And he was not a Italian person, but he was born in the U.S. His parents were Italian. He was not a wrap the knuckles with a ruler guy. It wasn't that old style. He was much more modern than that. But he was, he didn't give a lot of criticism, and when he complimented, it meant a lot, that kind of thing. But he was strict without being, I mean, he took me fishing too. We'd stand in Montana's beautiful mountain stream and fish together and stuff with my brother. And so that whole thing was Norman Rockwellian. And it was good, you know. So anyway, all the way through Eastman. And then we didn't know anything about music schools. We were remarkably, I wouldn't say ignorant, but we did some research through the University of Montana, and people listening now should remember this was, I went to college, my starting year was 1970, so it's pre-digital. And the point being contacting universities and getting in touch and sending reel-to-reel tapes for auditions, because we couldn't afford to fly across the country to Eastern schools. We wanted to go to my parents never pushed back against the idea of my going to music school. It was just sort of what music school, which was really cool.
And you just, once you started playing trumpet, loved it, and this is what you wanted to do for a living? Yes,
and part of that was I was really small. I think I was socially fine, but I wasn't part of the, let's go to high school period. You know, I was really small, and I'm coordinated in things, but not particularly athletic in terms of too small to participate, get crushed, you know.
Not going to be a linebacker, right?
Yeah, and spending a lot of time in music. So the music community was my society. I think the main point of that was I got a little notice, though. They even, in our high school yearbook, I recall one full page was my picture, because I was the guy playing music and traveling and going to play on TV and stuff like that. So self-esteem was good. That kind of energy.
So
and that really encouraged me to continue. And then that energy goes in a circle. And anybody who performs know the energy you get from not just accolades, but playing live and getting the energy from the audience.
That feedback,
it's abstract in a sense if you try to explain it, but it's real literal. So that. And then so we auditioned for Eastman by tape. Reel-to-reel tape. And I played a bunch of extras, some Charlie and some Haydn and some Hummel, way too much stuff. And I learned later that my professor, who was named Sidney Meir, not very famous, but anyway, professor at Eastman School of Music, listened to that tape, and I had gotten help from a university person to do like real good quality tape, which was Revox machines with the state-of-the-art, reel-to-reel. Well, there's half-track and quarter-track tape. What that means is how much of the tape you're using. One is designed for professional because it uses half the tape for each stereo side. And the other one is more for home use because you can flip the tape over and have different music. So it's using less of the tape, but the quality is less. The person who set us up had used old tape that had music on it, and it was flipped over. But Eastman School had the one that plays the whole tape. So he listened to my audition through an orchestra playing Peter and the Wolf. Now, in any other world, he would have just, a professor would have just thrown it in the garbage and said, nice try, kid. I hope you have fun. And he listened to it, and I got a full scholarship, ended up 6 years at Eastman, going through masters because I felt comfortable there. There was a lot of work in town. This is Rochester, New York, which is not the most famous or vital city to musicians, but it was happening.
Unless you're talking about Buffalo Wings.
Just up the road. There was a lot going on, and I was able to play many, many professional ensembles and gigs and sidemen things through school right away.
Right when you're getting in.
After a few months. I actually got into the Eastman Brass Quintet, which is the faculty brass quintet, as a sophomore, between the summer before sophomore year. And ended up playing with them through my time there.
That's fascinating. So was it any kind of adjustment going from having your dad teach you to now being in not that your father wasn't structured, but now formal school conservatory system and,
I adapted well. There were certain things you could look back on and go, I wish I'd concentrated on this or that more. It was also an early time, it was the peak new blossoming of the jazz program at Eastman. Before they had been totally classical and quite resistant to the jazz side. But finally the jazz program took over, was bringing in a lot of money, and the old dudes who were going to retire soon in the administration said, Uncle, you know, we have to say yes to this. And they came up with degrees and everything. And so there was that whole thing going on there too. And I was in the Rochester Philharmonic, third trumpet and assistant, and starting to go out to play solos as the reputation grew. Instrument company got interested. King, I think it was. I was with King for a while.
Did that just kind of happen organically?
Yeah.
Word of mouth, people heard about you, they heard you play?
Yeah, and some trips happened during, more toward my graduate period, where I was going to New York City and playing down there in the studios, or I did City Center Ballet with Lou Soloff and Duke Ellington music and things. I was learning so much because going back to Missoula, Montana, it's a really wonderful place to grow up, and they have a nice university and everything, but I didn't know anything about jazz or Miles Davis or Duke Ellington really until I was about 17. Wow. So that's a lot of years now, you know, water under the bridge, but that was a rude awakening, in the sense rude, like shocking, like, boy, I really better figure this out if I want to give it a shot.
What are these guys doing? Yeah.
Well, right? I really liked it. I mean, I had opportunities out of Eastman to go with the Woody Herman Band, which, for those that don't know, was a pretty famous road band by a guy who was famous, especially in the 40s and 50s. Well, earlier he was in movies and all that stuff, Woody Herman. Yeah. And he had bands that were constantly on the road with a really good and difficult book. I had an opportunity to play first with him. Their second time they had called me, and I didn't go the first time because I wanted to stay in school, and to play first in the San Antonio Symphony. Having played for the Alessandro was his name. The conductor with music director was in Rochester, and they said, you should hear him. So I played for him, and he offered the job. I went with the jazz group.
Really?
Group. It was in the trenches too. We'd play everything from these Quonset huts in the field in Virginia for a dance to Carnegie Hall recordings and stuff. Boy, that was a learning experience. And the power and the intensity, and, you know, 29 nights in a row without a night off, and 600 miles on the bus in the day, traveling to Europe. That was intense, and it's kind of do or die. And that's where I started to have the need to and experiment, the most, and get serious about finding the right mouthpiece for the job.
Interesting.
Bingo.
Interesting. So I want. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing that you're talking. Well, I'm working on jazz. A position in an orchestra, ability to play lead. Go with Woody Herman, play lead. I mean, did you have any particular goals in your mind at this point, or was it just everything was coming at you? And
yes,
what were your goals?
My goals were, I would like to become some sort of successful soloist.
Okay. Such
that I can do solo performances, and I was also interested in doing, I was also interested in doing my own compositions and having a group, perhaps on the jazz side that was, I would say, more fusion. I've really always liked the Chick Corea Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy type period, before it was more commercially Return to Forever, for instance. But also appealing. I always loved that, and had hoped to be able to become well known enough to fill concert halls such that I could control my calendar. Generally become the best and most active soloist I could. But I got not derailed, but these forks in the road where I had opportunities come up to perform with an orchestra, or to play with a college ensemble or something, or record with so-and-so in Europe, kept coming. And I kind of learned from a mentor at Eastman who was named Rayburn Wright, one of the professors there in jazz and contemporary media and arranging, that don't say no if you want to try things. Don't say no, just be ready to play the stuff. And which meant practice and learn, and when it comes up, don't be afraid. Yeah. My first Brandenburg concerto as the soloist was in Rochester I think I was a master's student, and I couldn't play through the piece in the practice room. I took the gig. I had
Really?
I had 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get through.
I got a piccolo trumpet, which turned out to be a dog. I found out later. And I went to Vince DiMartino, who was at school. So I was pretty young then, because he's 3 or 4 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me one thing, saved my life. And in terms of, he propelled me along the correct direction to approach the piccolo, which was, don't play anything loudly. Treat it like a flute. And I backed off, and the notes started to settle, and learned to practice not too much on it, et cetera, et cetera. That could be a lot of detail, but
No, I mean, we have geeky trumpet players,
when
me
it was-
among them, so that's the
okay,
stuff.
It
Yeah,
was
what
2
do you-
nights of Brandenburg and went fine, and yeah, I used piccolo trumpet ever since, you know.
Amazing.
Yeah. Then came Chick Corea. He heard me play with Woody's band.
Yeah.
And Jim Pugh, the great trombonist
Mhm.
who teaches in University of Illinois, if I have the nomenclature right, was a good friend too during Eastman, and he recommended me to Chick, so Chick listened. And then I ended up touring and recording with him for over the years.
Yeah. What was that like?
It's like being with the jazz, a Mozart of jazz, a kind one.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. I don't have time. We don't have time for me to really get going on that one, because there's so much.
We could do a follow-up Chick Corea
Yeah,
podcast.
I
But
mean, the
what
guy-
are a couple things you learned from him?
Or there's just so much about art and being absorbing what molecules of what he could do. I mean, he's on a level that's really hard to describe, but he had so much independence in his thinking. It was like two people with his hands were two complete different brains playing together and whatever they wanted to do. And his creative, he wrote tunes so quickly, and he was very nurturing. He would sit around with our family when our kids were little, and we go to hear him somewhere, and he's sitting there talking about art with my daughter, who was at the ITG this year, right? You saw her, and talking about soloing and art and improvisation, and she'd say, well, how would I learn to improvise better? He said, just play what you like. Don't worry about those numbers and chords. Well, here's a genius. You know, and he's so nurturing, and it was like, oh my gosh. And we had some fun times, not heavy partying kind of times. Just he'd have parties at his house in LA, but it was, Stevie Wonder would be there, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would be there, and but they're just hanging out. It's not like a Hollywood blowout. And talk about music, and people are playing through the whole thing.
Just a bunch of like-minded.
Sit down at the piano, and someone comes up and plays with them. And
oh man!
It was just, as you can see, I can go on and on, but it's
Well,
indescribable.
to get that picture of all these great musicians just doing what they do.
And one of my biggest influencers, for sure, touring with him and hearing me every night, because there was often a big solo section on acoustic piano, even when we toured with a more electric band. And I wasn't the actual named electric band with trumpet in it, but a lot of keyboards. And he would play a 30-40 minute solo, and it was never boring. And the audience was proof they wanted more.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's just part of the set.
Yeah.
So that kind of creativity, I bet most of our listeners who play music have had an experience where they're with a group that's as good as or better than they are, and they rise up. And you go home and say, how did I do that? Well, that helped me too. With being with people like him.
And then when you started doing your own groups and your compositions and things,
it was during that period, right, with him that I put my first fusion band together in LA.
Yeah. Fascinating. So how did you end up in it? Was it because of Chick Corea or?
No, it was a choice. And also who I knew. Here's another hour-long one, but I have known Doc Severinsen since I was 15. And the real short version is I didn't really feel comfortable in New York City in terms of just logistics and life. I don't know, a Western kid, and I liked visiting there. It was exciting and everything, and I didn't I wasn't that comfortable. I didn't feel like living there. So I knew it was New York or LA to pursue whatever it was I was pursuing. And I chose LA. Another factor, though, really, when you think about it. You know how kids, when they're going to college, they say, I wonder how the cafeteria is. That's how I'm going to choose my college.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Or it's pretty.
Yeah.
For me, it was getting out of the winter also. I was so happy to be out of winter.
Yep. Yeah, those Rochester winters
Oh
especially.
my gosh.
But
and
yeah,
growing
even
up in
New York
Montana
City.
too.
Yeah.
And lovely places, lovely people, but I was happy to do that. So anyway, when I did move, I was on the road for quite a while and kept a place in Rochester. Packed up, drove across the country, found a place to live, reconnected with Laura, my wife, who several years later, before we got together, after that. And my phone rang. And in about 3 days, I was doing my first studio date. I didn't know why. I had contacted Tom Stevens over the years and actually played with him a little bit. I had known Doc, and he was a fan. I mean, a friend, fan, mentor. And then being connected with Chick didn't hurt, and meaning Chick wasn't really involved in the, like, say, the movie studio scene, or anything like that. He had his own world in his own studio eventually, right? And then what was the other factor? I guess it was just it was traveling in and out of LA quite a bit during the Woody Herman days, playing in clubs and concerts and the important venues. Yeah. And so what I found out later, to end the story, was I started working right away and getting more and more calls, was Doc Severinsen and Tom Stevens both had said, look, if there's room, this is the guy you want. Because they're not going to displace the people they use.
Exactly.
There's the A-team, they're going to use them, and whatever.
When was this, like late 70s, 80s?
This was the end of 78, and then I stayed in LA because the phone was ringing, et cetera, which, wow, that was boomer. Yeah, that was very boomer. Phone rang.
Phone was it? Yeah. But I mean, for the folks listening, the studio scene was still roaring, but still in that time.
Yes, and everybody was complaining about the work slowing down then, just like
still,
it today.
Some things never change, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of TV, a lot of jingles, a lot of movies, a lot of live work.
And the style of television and movies involved a lot of brass. Cop shows, space shows, exciting things. Before any of the reality, no music shows kicked in. Yeah. So, I mean, what kind of stuff were you doing? Did you get some of the movies? Were you doing all of it? Yeah, a lot of movies. I mean, Back to the Future and the first Star Trek movie, and a lot of Clint Eastwood stuff, and composers like Michel Legrand and John Williams, 1942, that movie, and then TV shows, the cop shows, and Starsky and Hutch and Chips, and things that students may or may not know about because of YouTube. And then some really boring shows that had a lot of music and you made money. Like Love Boat was one where it was like a soap opera on a ship. Oh, yeah. But all through the whole thing, there was a lot of music. Yeah. And so you got paid somewhat because of the American Federation of Musician Rules. You got paid by the amount of music you were recording per hour at a certain point, and that had so much music in it, it paid great. And it wasn't all that easy. I mean, the French horn players had to play, when the ship is in Alaska and there's glaciers, they're playing dwa, 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 and the oboe player has to get out the English horn when the ship is in Egypt, or Turkey, on the smoke and all. So it's so literal, but
well, and at that time in LA, I find fascinating that because that's kind of like the crossover of like the older generation of studio players. Kleiman and Yuan Racy. Do you get to play with some of those guys?
Yuan Racy was very close, and he was probably in his 70s then.
Yeah. Johnny Audino was around then too.
I played on Tonight Show quite a bit because of Doc.
Yeah, that's right.
Jimmy Zito was the 5th trumpet player.
Jimmy Zito
was it 5th? Because there were 4 in the band. No, there were 4 trumpets, and Jimmy Zito, not a famous name to most of us, played in the Tonight Show Band back in the Johnny Carson days, which is a long time ago. He had a dental problem and stuff, and he actually never came back to playing. And so, rather than hire another trumpet player, they had me and Charlie Davis and eventually Chuck Finley would sub. And during my period, I was there a lot, quite a few times a month. But the thing was, here you're looking at this little guy from Montana again. I actually got to play on the Johnny Carson show every chair. Because someone would have the opportunity now that they didn't before, because Doc liked me and I covered the part, to go do a movie date or TV date or even take a vacation day or something that before they wouldn't ever ask. Yeah. Just because if you're not going to show up every time, you get somebody else.
Yeah, and that was a good gig.
And boy, was it fun.
Yeah.
It was a little nerve-wracking when I suddenly walked in and it was lead or something. But it was like clockwork, that show, though.
I'm curious. I mean, starting from Eastman and on, I mean, did you have a regular practice routine? Did you do a maintenance? How did you work on your playing at all during all of this? Or you just working so much that you just had road chops?
No, the short answer is I did. I wouldn't call it routine, but a wisely designed, wisely, I wasn't that wise. A practical design for practicing regularly, which involved a warm-up, some technical studies and music. And those 3 parts of that pie chart could change in length, depending on how you feel. During the road days with Woody and Chick somewhat, traveling a lot, it was difficult to practice, warm up. And when I came off the road with Woody, I was I couldn't really play Charlier smoothly or something like that. I had to get back to normal because it was pound travel. Chick was somewhat more luxurious travel, and also the book was more varied. And it wasn't a brutal book at all. It was kind of technical and fun and a little tricky because you did sit around a lot also. And then the small group was more of a small group experience, which I did both with him. So yes, I did always try to maintain that because I knew I needed it. And it's not just, for trumpet players, it's not just totally about the corner strength like everybody thinks it is. If you play regularly, your corner strength should be fine. And then you just keep it in shape. And for me, when I say flexibility, it's more like suppleness and response as opposed to lip slurry moves. Of course, we want to learn those, but physically speaking, I want to be supple and loose around here because my corners know what to do. And if I'm getting a little tired and I feel a little bit of long notes, I need to concentrate on making sure they last the right length, or whatever it might be. You're playing something a little loud, I will lock down a little more. But I don't concentrate on that except at specific moments.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anything specific you work on for doing the corners or for the flexibility?
I avoid that.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
That's kind of my point. Because
Yeah.
I think practicing is working on that.
Okay, just playing. Just playing.
The other reason is I was introduced to some of the more brutal practice routines, hours long, and don't take the mouthpiece off, or variations on that theme, and it beat me up. I couldn't play. I said, I'm not doing it. Done. Bye. If it works for so, and they teach it and love it, fine.
Great, yeah.
And I would encourage anybody watching this who's interested in trumpet to please do try things, but just be smart. If it's not working for you, don't use it. Give it a good chance. But don't believe, for instance, that if a book says you will play double high C in 10 minutes or 30 weeks or whatever it is, and you follow the routine and you feel like crap and you play worse, there should be a light bulb there. It's not working for you. The question is, does it work for anyone? Well, probably somebody.
Someone, yeah.
Yeah.
Bob Reeves always says, there's a million ways to play a trumpet.
Yeah,
It's-
perfect. That's what I should have just said to the beginning of this little
Fine, which,
segment.
well,
Yeah.
Bob was, he's a wise old...
He was a wise guy.
Yeah.
I'm not a wise guy.
Well, he
was
could
a
have been
smart
too.
and
So
wise guy.
Irish
and,
swagger is how I call it.
Ah, beautiful. Yeah,
I'll miss
I love
him.
talking to him.
What equipment were you using during that period? I mean, I know, were you
let
on
me think.
Yamaha then yet? Because, I mean,
No,
I want to get into that,
1980 was Yamaha when I had gone to Japan once with Chick Corea, and then I was back again. I've actually been there 49 times now, and this was my second visit, and Yamaha approached me about what they were doing then was to offer you some examples to take and try and have feedback. And they were in development, It wasn't a lot of years after the Schilke beginning of the trumpet influenced Mr. Schilke's influence in the beginning. On Woody's band, though, I was playing Benge 3X Plus. And I had gotten interested in Benge because I was on Getz, and Doc had given me one of those horns. It didn't even have a tuning thing on the first valve, Kirk or anything.
Yeah.
And when I got with the brass quintet, the faculty brass quintet at Eastman, they were good. And I noticed, oh my gosh, I'm having to mark like all the A's for the chord, whether to take it up or down. And I thought, maybe it's the trumpet. So Vince DiMartino and I piled in a car and drove to New York, where he grew up on Long Island. At that time, you could, at Giardinelli's or Manny's in New York, you could buy a new trumpet, no valve oil, no mouthpiece, no case, no nothing, trumpet, $275. And I was working, and that was cheap then.
Yeah.
So it sounds like dirt now,
Yeah. Doesn't even cover the tax now.
Yeah, the tax, yeah. So I bought a Benge because the first trumpet player in the brass quintet was playing Benge. And I tried a couple of them and ended up on a 3X Plus. Anyway, that took me through Woody Herman's band and the Fire Dance recording. And after that, I probably stayed on that a while. I was trying horns at shows and things. On Chick's band, I probably was still on that. I kind of don't remember, but I do remember on one of the small group tours, I took my dad's Martin Committee that he bought in the 40s. Big old, the valves were still great.
Oh, yeah.
And short stroke and big bell, meaning fat flare. My mutes would fall out of it.
Yep.
I still have it. He bought it when he was in high school.
Oh,
yeah.
Beautiful.
And
horn.
Martin Committee. And I played that on the small band because it had that fat sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember exactly. Oh, yes, there was a period when I did my first recording. I actually played on my only time I played for a length of time in Bach, other than C trumpet.
Yeah.
And it was a lightweight bell, and it had a star on it, and I think a 3. Bach people, you figure it out.
We'll get emails.
Yeah.
Someone will, I'm sure knows. So you brought up your first recording. Like, how did that come about? Where you just realized you were ready to start putting your own music down?
Yeah, but I wasn't rich enough or organized enough in terms of connected to how or experienced in production at all in studios and everything. And really, recording back then, you go to a studio and pay for it, figure out how to make it the best you can, and then hope someone picks it up. Anyway, it's tough for instrumentalists, tough for new guys. What happened was I had sent out and shared some of my performances at Eastman on cassette tape and made a compilation of some recital things that were some were unique and a lot of different styles in an attempt to make something happen, not specifically recording, but one of them found its way to a guy named Tutti Camerata.
Oh my gosh.
This guy was the guy who did Tutti's trumpets, right? Trumpet players know this recording if you don't know it. It was a recording of great studio players of the day playing solos, each with like orchestral and kind of jazzy accompaniment. Fantastic, famous for we trumpet players. For anyone who finds it, actually. And it was re-released, actually, in the 80s. So I became friends with him, and he said, why don't you make a record, and I'll be the executive producer, and all that I ask is you just work around the hours that are booked in my studio. So I would work late at night or when there were days off, and the drummer I had met Tom Breckline with Chick, and the bass player Bunny Burnell, and then later there were some other musicians involved too. And the first recording made enough money to pay for the second recording because Tutti Camerata launched that.
He had that. He had that backing, and
it was. I never really had a big label or a big success with huge numbers in recording, which is not uncommon for us. To be honest with you, especially on the fusion jazzy side, which is not very commercial.
But you still keep doing them.
It's
in you, and you put them out there because if you don't, no one else will, and
you got to do it yourself. And there are ways, and now there's so many. The studio that I used is probably on a laptop now, compared technologically speaking and computer-wise. So there's that, which helps. So, and that after that it was just life and working and balancing. I used to give up movie dates that would come in because I had booked playing at a college somewhere. But I did want to do the solo stuff, and I never told anybody that. As far as the business goes. You don't. Anyway, you don't really talk to contractors that much or anything.
No.
It was all through answering services, which now would be email or texting.
They just send a bulk email, blast email out. But
and they want a yes or no. They don't really want to hear about your life, right?
They have 200 other musicians to contact. And
exactly. The answering services were people on the phone, right? So they'd call and say, I got a call once that said, Universal Studios, Tuesday, whatever, 3 to 6 and 7 to 10. You want yes or no, and bring your angel. I said yes, but what's an angel? I don't know. It says bring your angel. It was bring your flugel.
It was like autocorrect before autocorrect or something. I love it.
Someone they told me later when I was touring with Chick, some contractor got a message back from this similar answering service that Alan won't be at the date because he's with the Chick in Korea. Oh, no. I had to straighten that one out.
So eventually you left L.A. I mean, was it a difficult decision for you? Because, you were highly in demand here. Was that like a big jump?
It was a big jump. It was difficult and easy both, if I could say that, because I do, and to this day, really miss playing with... The level is so high, and it's just... You're sitting in the middle of an orchestra that sounds like heaven. So there's that. There's the one note at the end of the session, pianissimo, solo, that you don't enjoy that much. That's going to cost him $10,000 if you miss it and go into overtime. That was a close call once for me. Count 32 bars and play that soft note. And if you miss it, it's going to cost him. It's like, oh, man, don't even think. Go fundamental, breathe in. Hope it comes out, that kind of thing. That's the tense. We often say, right, it's 80% easy and 20% terror, something like that. But what I did again, the whole solo career thing, I still wanted to push that, and make that grow. And I was getting a little bit, excuse me, I was noticing in my own thinking that sometimes I was at a date and I was thinking, well, I want to get out of here. When's the next date? You know, it was more of a craft than an art a lot of time, which it is, and all the musicians will admit that. I mean, a lot of the violin players play in little orchestras or do solo recitals because they want to do their art also, and they still love the studio work. Yeah, that sort of thing.
It's a different skill, and it's, like you said it perfectly, it's a craft.
And the other big factor was connecting with Laura and then starting a family and deciding to she was transitioning out before we really got connected and got married. And so I kept a place and came back and forth, actually from southern Idaho through Salt Lake. But at that time, I walked on the airplane once without a ticket because they remembered me. I kid you not.
I love it.
Yeah, a commuter to Salt Lake. And I could be at Burbank Airport, where my house was really near there, in 4 hours from my bed in Twin Falls, Idaho. This was a transitionary move because Laura went back to her hometown for a while to kind of regroup, and then life happened. And so we decided, I was commuting back and forth, which was not that difficult. But we decided finally we'd like to get to, especially to a major city on the West Coast, basically, and chose Seattle. Yeah.
And you've been there ever since.
Since 90.
Wow. So, and you've been either teaching, composing, doing your own projects, and soloing. Is it that...
The teaching part has been small.
Yeah.
I've done residencies, though, where I would travel somewhere 6 to 8 times in an academic year for a couple days. Mostly that sort of thing. And now some Zoom things.
Yeah. And then, of course, you wrote your method books, which are
that was early on.
Standard now.
Early on, that was when my 37-year-old was a baby, so that's when I was working on that.
That was, which thank you for those.
Those You're welcome.
Gave me hell and still do.
Oh, not this.
Charlie pulled those out for me, and I was like, oh, my gosh. So were there any challenges? Obviously, there's challenges with having a solo career, but I mean, was your practicing different, knowing that you had control over what your recitals were or your performances were when you're a special guest or you're performing your own,
I would say in general it's a little easier because it's more predictable. I mean, I've had years where I was just really all over the world for many months, and then other ones are relatively quiet with 4 or 5 weeks at home at a time. Because some people think I book solid. Well, I probably would if that happened, but it hasn't happened consistently that way, and it's fine. But getting back to the practice thing, when you have a schedule coming up that you know about and some time in the middle or before, you can practice more than once in the day. You can skip a day if you want, if it feels that, if a mature player feels it helps them. It's not an excuse to skip practicing if you just don't feel like it.
Yeah.
But it can happen.
There's a difference between rest and being lazy.
Yeah,
right?
and there's being human, where it does mentally help you, and just put it away and let it not bother you if it's bothering you, something like that. So I think it's actually a little bit easier to organize. And then with the goals coming up, say a big concerto or something, to really have time to work toward that happened much of the time. Meaning sometimes it came up quickly, or they were so busy we're working on programs together. I played a lot of big concertos with Syracuse Symphony that I'd written. I mean, when I say a lot, I wrote quite a few big pieces because they were willing to do it. Good orchestra at the time, really good. And my point was, I'd like to do them from memory. So it takes a little time, repetition, especially pieces that had never been performed. So you don't really know what it's like to sit in the swirl of the music when you're not playing. And it was nice to have time to pace through that. So
which
I guess it's logical.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, you've played a lot of pieces that you've written.
Yeah.
What is and it took you 3 weeks to do the Brandenburg that one time. I'm sure if you wanted more time, could have more time, you'd wanted that.
Yeah.
But take us from, like, if you're starting a new piece, either that you've written or from somebody else, I mean, what does that process look like? You open it up?
I just blast through it.
Really?
Yeah. That whole thing of studying a page, for me, when a student comes in and says, well, I only learned the first page of the Haydn or whatever. Really? Well, what did you think of the last movement? Well, I haven't even looked at it yet. I don't understand that. I can't wait to see what the whole thing is and have fun sight reading it. I'm not going to try to not going to worry about or be hard on myself for things that are difficult or things I need to work out. Now, referring to the type of music too, if it's a real blip and bleep, modern, contemporary, not metered, whatever, those are tough to put together and are going to take a lot of rehearsal, and maybe not from memory kind of things, because I'm not I don't have eidetic memory or anything like that. But the process, I like to go over all and then play through it a lot. Memorization-wise, for me, is repetition. If it's a famous piece, I'll use recordings, play along with recordings. It helps because I don't want to count bars. And I'll have a specific spot or two where, oops, I keep coming in a bar. That's early. That's 3, Alan, 3. And when I get to that spot, I count 3 bars and go. You know. So it's not rocket science, but that's kind of the process for me. Okay. If I'm not comfortable with the memorization, I'll use music. Luckily, the brass world, we can get away with it. I'm talking about formal orchestral settings. In other settings, of course, we can get away with it in bands and things. But the etiquette and the practicality for strings and piano, etc., they don't use music much.
Yeah.
And almost never, actually, for soloists. Pianists, great pianists, never.
Yeah.
Well, you can't turn pages. I mean, I've seen a real great pianist do a recital with a page turner. Maybe the music was new to them or something. That's whatever.
That's fine.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. But the etiquette and everything, I wanted to kind of be in that spot. Yeah. In that setting.
Fascinating. Well, I know you're in demand here at ITG. I have a few short questions for you.
Okay.
Number one, we had touched on your equipment and you started, I mean, you've been with Yamaha, like you said, since early 80s. Can you talk about how the Vizzutti model developed to its current form?
Yes, we decided, I had the okay to start from scratch. Bob Malone and Wayne Tanabe and I decided, let's start with the horn you like. And there wasn't a lot that I didn't like, but we're trying to improve always. And so it was the New York B-flat, which is a Zeno line. And we started tweaking it, and we ended up doing some things that had to do with parts of weight and brace placement and small things like they call it the chimney on the water key, which when I was a kid was a spit valve. But it's gentle to call it a water key.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember some other things. All brass parts in the valve, except for the actual piston. Yeah. Instead of anything lightweight. Yeah. Things like that. A different receiver than was on the New York at that time. And what I was going for was a deeper harmonic structure, or more broad harmonic structure, and more open above high C when you lean on it. Now, the mouthpiece really comes into play here for whether someone would like that horn or not, or any horn, right?
Yeah, of course.
But I'm on my mouthpiece.
Yeah.
And that's going to be my horn. And so that really, within a few hours in one day, we had it kind of nailed. And I took it home, and before, of course, any production happened, assessed it and was happy with it.
And that was it.
That's
a great horn. I know a number of guys in town use it. And
yeah.
And mouthpiece-wise, you're on picket, right? That's. Could you tell us a little bit about that? How that came about?
Sure. It can be long, but way back in the beginning, when I was searching for Woody Herman's group, I knew I needed to have something a little help to help me, not too symphonic. And I came across. I manipulated Schilke's numbers because, again, there was no communication except phone and all that. Gave him some numbers to try diameter-wise and blah, 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 and came up with a mouthpiece that worked pretty well, custom. Everywhere I'd go, I'd get it copied in terms of cities. Bob Reeves, Giardinelli, Boston, who was it? Tottle or something.
Tottle, yeah, who's out there.
And others. And then finally, and the reason I would do that is if one worked better, I'd just switch. But I never asked for anything except copy. And with handwork and different lathes and different blades and all different companies and backboards and everything, there were big differences. Yeah. Some of them went right in the garbage or in the box, and the other ones I'd switch. There was a Giardinelli one I used quite a while. Now, I can hardly play it now.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it was real sharp in the high register, so I was constantly changing during Woody's band. Like when I got warmed up, wow, out. But I found out later that's partially me because I still do that quite a bit. Then Marcinkowicz's version, he became a friend, which I really liked the feel of it and everything. It became a little too brittle. I think it's a backbore style, which helps with intonation, but it becomes too brittle for me for the other music. Then Yamaha, so I played that one 20-some years. And then I tried Peter. He did his computer lathe magic, and Yamaha was not upset. I want to toss out there, they were happy. Whatever works for you, we're happy with it.
Yeah.
and can we still sell your mouthpiece? I said, sure, because if I had to play the Yamaha Vizzutti one yesterday, had to, I could have. It's that close.
Yeah, a good piece is a good piece.
Yeah, the
That's
thing I like about
like-
Peter's is just the harmonic and the feel and the openness was a little bit different. And that has to do with probably with weight and tools and all that stuff.
Everything affects
It's
everything.
kind of that copy effect again. Totally that copy effect again.
Yeah.
So, and we've only done tiny little tweaks that experiment. I go there once in a while.
Yeah,
But
not
I
as
have
much as
not
not
been
as much as Doc.
No, oh my gosh, no. I've not been a mouthpiece freak at all.
Absolutely wonderful. One even shorter one. How the heck were you sitting in the practice room one day and getting bored and decide, I'm just going to turn my trumpet around and play it upside down? How did that come about?
Oh, well, this is not as short as you think.
Okay.
It's okay. It's okay. Hungary recital with a great tuba player, soloist, really, and composer. We're splitting recital. He invited me. That's the setting. A beautiful, beautiful old concert hall, like recital hall, a few hundred people, packed. The audience is there, no classical music. They love all kinds of music. They go crazy for a beautiful classical piece. Meaning they react. We're trading solos. At the end of the night, the audience is going nuts and asking for more. So we're coming up with encores. And I play Napoli and the old cornet stuff on trumpet, kind of Doc style, and Del Steger's Carnival a lot as an encore alone and things like that, clinics, mass classes, whatever. And his name is Roland Zampali, played this fabulous thing on tuba, and he whipped off his mouthpiece at the end, and he played a high G for trumpet on the lead pipe. Yeah, I know.
I wish there was a video of that.
There is
gosh.
probably.
Yeah.
Because there might be.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of, whatever. I remember I'm playing Carnival, and I'm a little tired, and just we're having fun at that point.
Yeah.
Total fun. Because we had done a chamber orchestra and piano, and then us. Brass ensemble and then us. So it was a nice concert. I'm playing Carnival. I'm thinking, almost finished. I saw Chuck Dallenbach turn his tuba around once in a Canadian brass concert. I think I'll try that.
You did it in the
I did
concert?
it live, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it was on YouTube, and then it became in a nice way, the Frankenstein that keeps coming back to see me.
Yeah, now people expect it.
Well, they like it.
Yeah, of course.
It's kind of hilarious though when I don't do it on purpose, in a concert with band, for instance, and you see the trumpeters go, oh, and sigh and go, oh, and then I'll encore it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Consummate showman. You hung around Doc a lot.
Yeah. Great influence.
Yeah. Absolutely
Wonderful
amazing. Thanks for being on, Alan. How can folks find out about you? Your website? You don't do social media much, right?
Instagram.
Instagram. You're on Instagram?
Is my hotspot.
Awesome.
And then Vizzutti.com.
Okay, and we'll make sure we have links to all those folks.
And the music from the recital, for those interested, is all available there. Also,
Wonderful.
along with other pieces. And it's not all unplayable.
Yeah.
A lot of it's playable.
Yeah, and if you do your method books, it might be even more playable because...
You never know.
Yeah. Absolute honor having you on here. I can't let you go without one last question.
Okay.
If you could leave our listeners with your best piece of advice,
yes,
it could be
I
about
can.
anything.
I can.
What would it be?
Be kind.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Alan, thank you so much for your time at this wonderful, crazy
Thank
show.
you. We're shaking under the mics here, over the mics. All right.
I've hit these many a time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Well, Alan is one of those guests that I've wanted to interview since episode 1 over 10 years ago. And funny thing is, he used to call and come into the shop fairly regularly, or we used to see him at ITG conferences. And just for whatever reason, the last 10 years, we haven't crossed paths. And lo and behold, we ended up sitting at the same table at the wine and cheese event with Håkan Hardenberger. So we got to catch up. Both him and his wife, Laura, were there, and their family, after performing a very successful recital at ITG. And so, Alan, thank you for, one, keeping us company at that wine and cheese event, and then also thank you for giving your time for this interview. We'll have to have a follow-up with you. We just scratched the surface of your career, and but still a lot of great stuff that you provided in this interview. AlanVizzutti.com, Vizzutti.com is the website. Like he said, he doesn't really do social media much, but everything you need to know about Alan will be on his website. And we'll make sure to have the links down below in the description to this video and podcast, and also on the show notes. That's it for this episode. Next episode, we have the wonderful Scott Belk A number of you already know him for his crazy lip slurs. In fact, I interviewed him at the annex to the Lip Slur World Headquarters. A little inside joke there for those of you who know Scott. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like button. All the things. Hey, maybe even share this with your friends. We always appreciate it. Until next time, thank you for listening. Let's go out and make some music.